Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon.
Well, the podcast series that I've been building for 157 episodes has now taken another wonderfully positive turn toward another sort of practitioner, Maria Kingery, who with her husband built a green energy design enterprise in North Carolina. And then for the additional part of her time, she is helping develop B Corps around her region, her company being one of the very first B Corps for that state. So that's the turn. I found another person who I like a lot from just the first 30 minutes we've talked, whose work I really value. And I know you will learn a great deal about what it means to align your practice in a endeavor, a company whose purpose is that it's going to have a lot of really positive impact on society, the community, and the people who do the work within it. This is the future, folks. This is the future. And this is Maria Kingery. Well, folks, this is what the magic of this work that I'm doing is that when you meet someone who's really interesting and interested in her practice, she will say, well, you should also follow up with another person who's very interested in her practice. And both of those practices, Lizzie Friedman's and Maria Kingery, are rooted in their belief that businesses do have social impact and they can be designed to make sure that that impact is positive in every possible regard. So I found Maria, and I am so excited about learning about all that she does. And the big question for the Practice Podcast is always why? Why this, and of all the things you could do with your life? Maria, tell us first about the things you just told me, the two things that keep 100% of your time occupied.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm really excited to be here and really respect the work that you're doing. I'm grateful for that. So I am co-founder and chief impact officer of an organization called Southern Energy Management that has been a B Corp since 2009. We've recertified. I think we're coming up on our fourth or fifth recertification, and this year in 2022. And we do solar and green building work in the Triangle area of North Carolina. I have about 150 team members. So definitely get to practice with that group. And then that's about 20% of my time. And then 80% of my time, I realized several years back that this whole concept of like doing the work and bringing it to life inside of organizations was something that I'm passionate about. And so I work with other impact-driven organizations to help them really operationalize their impact goals and become work on their organizational development, leadership development, developing their middle managers, all around this concept of how do they have a greater impact in the world.
Wow. And I suspect we throw another 20% of your time to make it 120% so you can take care of other matters and take care of family members and all the things that we do. Yeah. This, I had told you in introducing myself that I was only aware, even as a business professor, of the whole notion of B Corp and Benefit Corp because of my collaboration with Kate Emery some years back, who here in Connecticut felt that she didn't want to hand her business over when she finally was ready to do that to just anyone who would then change all of the things that made the business, I think, pretty darn wonderful in regard to how they treated people, from the customers and other stakeholders to their employees. And so I started learning, and learning by doing. and went through that whole process, and then made sure that my business students, the management students that I was teaching, undergraduates, were well aware that they could be very proud of a life in business, despite what they hear in the gory headlines, and even despite the way they're treated when they're working part-time in some of the corporations. And to not give up that expectation that when you're ready to put your life into the hands of a business, make sure that you believe in what they do. So absolutely, you're doing this work. Before you get started in the work in North Carolina in that company, what were you doing before that brought you to the point where you went, whoa, this is what I want to do. I want to do this kind of work in the green impact aspects of business?
Yeah, well, in some ways, David, goes all the way back to childhood, right? I grew up in a beautiful part of Virginia that very much connected to the environment, spending lots of time outside. And then also feeling, my mother was a small business owner. And so I watched how she ran her business and really people forward. And so the combination of those two things have really been inside me, I feel, for my entire life, just something that is in my DNA. But then specifically starting Southern Energy Management shortly after 9/11, as many people did, sort of taking stock of what is it that we are doing with our lives. My husband and I had both had the opportunity to work at Burt's Bees, which was when we started working there, a very small company, and watched it grow rapidly and do it in a way that was outside of the norm. Really watched the founders there, and particularly Roxanne Quimby, take a stand for the environment and the way that she chose the packaging for the products, the way that she chose the models that she used. I used real people as opposed to like supermodels and things like that. And just a very grounded, I would say, and authentic way of doing business. And so after 9/11, my husband and I, and he was also a child of entrepreneurs, we wanted to start a business, and we wanted it to be a business that made a difference in the world. And solar and green building were, very fringe at the time. Like, this was 2000. 2001 when we founded the business. But for us, it really was, we happened to be pregnant with our first, and now we know, only child. And we wanted, as cliche as it sounds, we wanted to run a business that we were proud of and that was going to make some small impact in making the world a better place for him and generations to come. Wow.
I have to do a quick segue to Burt's Bees. You might have noticed I have a slight Maine accent.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
It gets to be a little less slight as I go along in this conversation. But we were in Maine, and I was a dean of public service in the University of Maine system when Burt's Bees was created. Oh, wow. And one of my daughter's friends was the daughter of the person who founded it, and the name does not come to mind, but
Hannah.
Yes. And I was very much moved by the fact that what you just said, it was a Maine way of producing something of value to others, the skincare, all of the things that Burt's Bees was involved in. They were insistent upon it being grounded in the way anyone in Maine would want to be treated. And that was sort of the way I grew up as a native of Maine. We definitely the golden rule took care of an awful lot of our behavior. And granted, those are idyllic times too. But the pragmatic aspect of that business, which grew very well and, went on to sort of like Ben and Jerry's, it reached a point where in order to scale it, it had to be sold. But while it was growing, that was, I was also influenced by it. So here we are together on that. The other thing about solar, at that time, we were in the energy crisis in the 70s. And we raised the money to create an energy awareness and problem solving service to pretty much alleviate as much as possible the dependence on fossil fuel. And I can remember Tom Easler, one of our wonderful geology professors, who was just said, Maine we don't need oil. And yes, we can burn wood, which is a start, but even that's pollutant, but let's move ahead. And then someone came to one of our skull sessions, as we call them, and said, I don't know if any of you all noticed, but if you look up right now, you'll see that we have a whole lot of sun and a hell of a lot of wind. This is the 70s, early 80s. You're like, oh, yeah. What do we do about it? And then we were sort of thinking, well, solar might be on its way, but it was extraordinarily expensive back then. So by the time you reached that point and were able to see how solar could be commercialized and also made available to homes, how did that go? What were some of your early experiences in getting that not only off the ground, but for people to even care to change from their dependence on fossil fuel and gas?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, Southern Energy Management we have about half of our people do solar work and about half of them do energy efficiency or green building consulting. And what we discovered, and that was really by accident. I would love to say that was by design, but it was really by accident, because when we started off, gung ho in the solar industry, what we quickly realized in 2001 was that it was priced out of the reach of most people. I mean, I think the panels themselves at that time were like $12 a watt. And just for reference, like now they're somewhere in the way sub $1, like 55 cents per watt. And so it's become much, much more affordable. But at the time it was one of my very first lessons in business was, oh, wait, people actually have to have a willingness to pay for, we could have all the altruistic ideas in the world, but there were very few pure solar customers in the very beginning, which is why, but we were really rooted in this idea of we wanted to do something about energy. And so when we became familiar with the concept of green building and like actually reducing the energy loads of the building so that it would need less energy, we grasped onto that. And that was how, these two pieces that we believe, again, are interconnected. Like it's how in the built environment, it's how you make and use energy are interconnected. But it was quite by accident in the beginning. Or survival, I would say. It was for matter.
Oh, well, that desperation is the mother of invention.
That's right.
And entrepreneur life is, as I'm sure you've lived for a while, and now you're helping others, which we'll get to in a moment. But I'm thinking about the green aspect, and it's still fairly, 15, 20 years ago. And we had, in my energy resource center, we had ways to tell people to seal their windows, but be careful. Don't do it if you're going to stove fire going in there. You can leave some air, all that stuff to kind of conserve what energy was the heat which was generated. But that's not quite the same as green, is it? That, saving energy by retrofitting houses is, I think, part of it. But what's the green scheme, Maria?
Yeah. Well, it really goes from the beginning of when you're thinking about designing the house, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Or any building, right? It begins there. And so things as like the orientation of the home, or the building, will it be suitable for solar? Designing it such that, your roof space, that you've got the space to generate on-site electricity. And so, we talk about it as a continuum, right? So the the very basic is let's build a house or retrofit, which we actually don't do the retrofitting side. Other companies do that, but let's make sure that it's as efficient as possible, again, and healthy. And then only then do we talk about like adding renewables to it to, our vision is ultimately, we'll live in zero energy homes. I mean, we've helped to build several of those, and they're a reality now. And even some that generate more electricity than they consume, but it's still the exception and not the rule. But it really is that whole and it's really a matter of awareness and having that intentionality around, this building. Hopefully we're building buildings that are going to be around, right, for
a long time,
a good long while. And so thinking about the life cycle of those buildings and what the consumption is, and when you get really fancy about it, you start thinking about the materials that you're using and where they came from. It can be a whole journey.
You don't throw a lot of plastics in a house that's going to be, or anything that like that's a lot of thinking, and you're requiring your customers, your clients, to espouse the values that you share in a way, don't you? I mean, they may not have the whole picture, but there's got to be some root sentiment there that about, and you find, and you have a conversation, and pretty soon there's a house design or a store design or your factory design. What is it like when you find someone who's receptive to doing it differently?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, of course, Dave, that was sort of difficult, right?
I know, you're looking for where's Waldo, right? Exactly. In the crowd, the one guy with a little stripy hat.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I remember one of our first builders that we started to work with was a third generation builder. And, he was a young guy and he was like all into it. And he was like, yes, this is what we need to do for the environment. It's just the right thing to do. And his parents, who were, the second generation, were like, this is crazy. Like, people aren't going to pay for this. People aren't going to buy this. And so it's been interesting, to see the evolution that has occurred over time, because in the beginning, it felt like we were evangelizing, right? And we were having to convince people. And now it's almost expected, right? The market has come along and the consumer is really driving it. They want more efficient homes, and they want the products that we're helping our builders and developers and towns and things to provide. But in the beginning, it really was, and it was, you asked the question, what did it feel like? It was like very exciting when we found someone who, wanted who shared our vision for what buildings could be.
You still have that house in the region where you're working? Can you go by and say, this is our first?
I'm sure, there are still several homes that were early that, and one of the first, eventually we got into larger and larger scale solar, and one of the first utility scale solar systems that was ever built in North Carolina is literally, I drive by it to get to my house every day, that our company put up. So that's kind of cool.
How's that feel when you drive by and take a quick glance?
It's interesting. We divested the utility scale part of our business.
Yeah, I want to get to the other part too.
Yes,
the other 80%. But this is very much what practice is about. When you go by something that was a first for you, and ever since you've seen evolution, and there it is, and you glance at it, there's got to be a sentiment there.
Well, there is. I mean, I would say I have obviously some sense of pride in that, because, and really, if this sounds a little odd to say, but almost I'm proud that we took the risk, because we were doing something that hadn't really been done before. Right. And so when I think about our company that we built, there's a strong the word I frequently will use is pioneer. Like we pioneered some things.
Yeah.
And as a Mainer, right, you're well familiar with the concept of, it's just like, this is what we want to see in the world. And somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to go first. So, hey, let's go for it. And so I'm proud of that version of myself, and that there's a lot to be afraid of, right?
Yeah. Were there moments when you and your husband looked at each other and said, let's get on in a newspaper and look for the want ads?
Oh, of
this
course.
This is great. This is too crazy. Heck with Burt's Bees.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, staying true to our vision and to our mission really is what I believe has kept us going through those times. And, I've spoken about this in other places before, like, we had the near-death experience of our company that many organizations go through, right, when they experience rapid growth. And there were many days that we looked at each other and said, what have we gotten ourselves into? But I will say this, I never questioned whether it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I questioned whether I had the skills, right? And I had the tools in my toolbox to be growing a rapidly, fast growing company. But I never questioned whether we were doing the right thing.
Well, that's awfully important, Maria. Definitely what gets the best people through those terrible moments is the belief in the right thing, which now takes us to the Benefit Corporation itself, because it's sort of a codification, it is a codification and a reinforcement that the people who found and develop and sustain a particular business believe they're doing the right thing. And I would add to that, no matter what,
right.
Because we have been through 2.5 years now of no matter what, of every kind, from human health to the shaking of our institutions, you name it. So you really should be doing the right thing, or what's the alternative?
Absolutely. And, being a B Corp, so we became a B Corp in 2009. We were, I think, number 10 or something in North Carolina. We'd never even heard of such a thing, right? We were, had always tried to run our business. One of the things that we always said was, it's not just what we do, but how we do it. And we'd always tried to run our business in a way that was sustainable for our people and for the environment. But we didn't have a way to know that we were doing it, quote unquote, the right way until we learned about B Corporation, right? And getting certified and finding that community of people was a huge, huge piece, going back to, where we began the conversation, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we're not alone. And we're not these crazy people like trying to run a business. Because I remember talking with a friend of mine and a fellow entrepreneur about sort of this triple bottom line. That was the language back then that people were using. And she said to me, gosh, Maria, one bottom line is hard enough. Like, why do you want to take on two more?
Two more. Yeah.
So and it is what I believe, we celebrate our 20th anniversary. And I think that's what's helped us to stay the course over time. How
did you find the B Corp community?
Well, the B Corp, as I mentioned, when I first became acquainted with this group of people and recognized that there was this community of businesses who were committed to, and the phrase that we use now is using business as a force for good. It was, what's the overwhelming emotion that I felt? I would say relief and excitement that, first of all, there were other people that we could learn from. There were people who were also engaged in this work, and that we could learn from their best practices. And honestly, not just the things that worked well for them, but the things that didn't work well for them. Hopefully, we wouldn't have to make some of the same mistakes as a community. And I will say, I've been involved with quite a few business, entrepreneurial types of communities. There is none in the world like the B Corp community. I mean, the support and the sense of kinship and camaraderie, because it's a big deal to make a commitment that we're going to have a third party verify that we are meeting these standards, right? I mean, that's, and it's not a simple process, and it's a real commitment. And so to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with other organizations, large and small, who have made that same commitment, has been, it's fueled the passion of my life, I would say.
Wow. You're great. You're a great spokesperson for this. And it's a movement because it's still young, as far as I can tell. We're not talking decades here. Do you have, this is an unfair question, but do you have any knowledge of who started this whole movement as a person or an
Yeah, so it was three guys, Bart Houlihan and Jay Cohen Gilbert and Andy. Oh gosh, I always forget Andrew's last name. That's so bad. But anyway, their friend Andrew, and they had run a company called And One that was sold. And when that company was sold, the buyer did not uphold many of the social and environmental things. So they founded it. They started it. It was amazing.
And it, we're talking about nationwide and beyond.
Yeah.
From their disappointment and what happened when they sold their company to the moment where someone like you is saying that this is such an invigorating affiliation for you to be in at this time in your career. What about that other 80% now? Are you helping spread the B Corp light, to the darker corners of the North Carolina, Virginia area?
I hope so. That's the intent. So now I spend the majority of my time working with other organizations. You asked about the founders. I remember having a conversation with Bart Houlihan. He happened to be in North Carolina when SEM, Southern Energy Management, was really down in the depths of our despair. And he sat in front of my desk and said, "Maria, no money, no mission." I mean, I was just beside myself that we were having to lay people off, and we were having to make some really difficult business decisions. And he said those words to me: "No money, no mission." And where I'm going to relate that back is about 6 years ago, I recognized that Southern Energy Management had gotten to the point where the B Corp values, the B Corp commitment was firmly embedded. Our core values, I just really felt like the way the company was operating did not need me on a day-to-day basis to make sure that it continued on a right path. Right. And so at that point, I really took a look at, where can I add the most value? And so I decided to go out and work with other purpose-driven organizations, impact organizations, particularly environmental and social, to help them to install tools, we refer to as an operating system, just like your phone has an operating system. Sure. It operates in the background. Your business needs an operating system. So how do we have effective meetings? How do we have, meaningful conversations with our team members? Setting, baseline foundational tools into an organization. in order to help them to be successful. Because, and again, we talk about it in terms of like, you've got a great purpose that starts with that, then that attracts great people. Once you have great people, you need a great playbook. How are you going to do your work together? And then you need to measure performance, make sure that you're actually achieving the things that you're setting out to. And from that, at the center, right, then comes prosperity. And so it's not, yes, money, no mission. That's a key part of prosperity, but it's broader than that. Also, how are you treating your people and how are they growing and your customers and all those?
I think of that notion of prosperity, so I'm almost 80. I know I don't look it. Yes, I do. No. But I'm thinking of the time when prosperity was a political campaign, peace with prosperity. And it flows back in and out of my awareness over time. I haven't heard it much recently. And I realize we had a couple of real big calamities in 2008-9, and then through the pandemic, and having worked with young adults as a professor during all of those times, I used to feel almost wishful that they would understand that prosperity is not economics alone.
Yeah.
That it's not what an accounting spreadsheet will tell you, and that it's a state of being.
Yes.
And an individual who's prosperous may not have, as we would say in Maine, a pot to piss in. But
we say that in Virginia too.
But I wouldn't say that on my own podcast. But they had a prosperous way about them, and it used to fascinate me. I would be with people who, picked up a hammer and made a living for the day, and they would seem very happy. And I remember asking him as a kid, you want to make 25 cents an hour doing this? And yeah, but we got food on the table and we got a roof over our head, got my church. And there was a sense of prosperity in that way. Just one can determine for herself or himself that they're going to prosper in whatever they have at hand. Now, but you bring in an idea, a purpose that others will pay for, and eventually pay well enough so that you can be profitable. But also what I remember what Kate Emery did in her benefit corporation charter was, we're going to give 1/3 of our profits to social causes. So she put money on the table for those values. And another third was going to go into benefiting the employees, and so not an ESOP, but something along the lines of employee ownership. So, and the other third, she and her husband, they can live comfortably. So they've determined how to prosper and without going the route of so many people who could have driven that corporation right up to the point where, they were living higher up in the hill.
Yeah.
By the way, Kate has now stopped, both CEO of Reset and her company, and she's now painting, very happily painting landscapes and so forth. You'll hear her podcast very recently. And right now she's painting sunflowers, and people who purchase those, 70% of what they pay for that painting will go to the Ukrainian support. So this is the way that you can tell a person who built two businesses around the idea of what you're discussing, doesn't just turn around and say, okay, I'm going to paint pictures. She still has the same ethos. I suspect you would be doing that too if you ever stopped getting busy and wanted to try something of a hobby nature. It never would work that you would do it solely for yourself, Mary.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, so there's an interconnectedness, right? And in the B Corp community, that's one of the declaration of interdependence. Mm-hmm. And so a big part of what prosperity means to me is that this interconnectedness is respected and is considered and is valued and invested in. as you said. So largely in my work, I think of that in terms of, the people that we're impacting, and then the impacts that they're having outside of the organization. One of the big things that I'm most passionate about, and it's become something of a popular topic right now, is this whole concept of like being able to be, fully inclusive, and people being able to bring their full selves to work, which has been, things we've been talking about for a long time, but COVID really, really brought it home. Like, how do we actually do that? Mm-hmm. And so, one of the core concepts is like everybody in the organization should be equipped with the tools to be able to run a great meeting, not just the managers, right? Everybody. So you sort of level that playing field so that everybody in the organization is able to contribute. Everybody in the organization should have a say on how are we measuring success. Really, right? Yes, profitability is important because we have to be sustainable, but like maybe that's not the end all be all.
Yeah. One of the real interesting challenges we had in our strategic meetings for Reset in our board meetings was to try to help people understand social impact, try to make it concrete enough so that when we'd go out, say, well, we want to talk about impact, because it's easy to show people how much money you have or don't have, but it's not always that easy to measure social impact. But in the process of trying to learn how to do it, we learned a lot about social impact. So I guess the point is, if you want to know what impact you have, figure out a way to find out. If your intention is not only affordable housing, but energy self-sufficient housing, then there's an impact right there. So yes, dedicate yourself to it, and you can take people down the street and say, I did that. We did that.
And, you mentioned like, how do you measure and how do you know? I mean, that was one of the things that Southern Energy Management did in the, green building and that aspect of our work was go out and verify homes and like do testing to verify. And sure. So when we learned about B Corp, it was like, hey guys, this is what we do. We verify. We're third-party verifiers. Of course, we would want to be third-party verified. And, I would say, I think currently 75% of the clients that I work with are certified B Corps. And another couple are on the path, the journey. And then I've got a few who they're never going to be certified B Corps. That's not their goal. But for them, we're still talking about impact and looking within the framework of the sustainable development goals. And like, okay, so where do you say you want to have an impact in the world? Which one of these are, for your business are things that you can tackle? And, and the importance of just setting the goal and then working towards it and then communicating it, all things that you taught your students.
We did, but it didn't have as much heart in it as I'm hearing in this. We talk about goal setting from forever, but it was largely those things that be measured in Busineses, which, largely was a language of finance and accounting. And of course, an organization behavior professor like myself was always saying, well, wait a minute, it's really, we're speaking human here. And so let's talk about goals in terms of the change in the circumstances of people's lives. And then they look at me and say, is this going to be on the test? No, the kids weren't that. The kids actually got it. And I've had former students in my podcast series now. You'll hear one I just finished editing, and you'll hear it this week. Estefania, who is working for a major insurance company now as a marketing analyst. And you think she loves to crunch numbers, but you'd listen to her and you'll hear that she sees a lot beyond the numbers in terms of the story that numbers tell, and her concern about the people who are affected by those numbers. So, yeah, it works. It does.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my time, and there's so much more I want to know, and I'm talking too much. David, you're talking too much. But when you're out there working people, and now you're in the goal setting process, what sort of things are people aspiring to these days? What do they want to make their business somewhat unique in their terms of their purpose? Have you come across any who are that sharp at wanting to do something quite differently?
So when you ask that question, the first client that comes to mind is a woman-led company that I work with called First Hand Foods. And their goal, they are really looking to transform the way pasture-raised meats, the way that meat gets consumed. And so they've taken a systems approach and gone out and said, okay, we're going to partner with the actual farmers, and we're going to contract with them and be their conduit to the marketplace. So it's a variety. And the way that they've approached it is, we're going to help you sell your meat to institutions. We're going to help you sell your meat into, high-end restaurants. We're going to help you, some cooperatives certainly, and some end consumer, but it's this whole systems approach of like, how do we take, and the unique thing that they do is they take the whole animal. So like anybody, like you can sell a grass-fed steak all day long, right? But all the other parts of the animal, like how do you get the most benefit for the farmer, is by selling the whole animal. And so they're looking at it from that angle, as well as the whole regenerative agriculture angle. So when we're measuring their impact, we're measuring the number of animals, of course, the number of farmers that they're partnered with. We're looking at the number of acres that are being grazed, right? And so looking at all these different aspects, and again, tying those back to, they are an aspiring B Corp. They're in the process of getting B Corp certified, but also putting those within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, so that they can say to the rest of their team, hey, we're connected to something that's much larger. And here's our approach. And they also have, again, a very systems-based approach where they're looking at who can they partner with, not just in terms of like the processing, but who in other parts of the country, how can they make this a more available way for people to get healthier meats, and for farmers to, small scale farmers. These are not large scale farmers, right?
Oh yeah, right. I get that. And all over the country, there would be people to partner with. And here's another nice plus. Since you and I were working in the vineyards back in the day, trying to get some social ideas up and running. And now, though your partner clients who are doing this unusual work can go to dozens and dozens of websites and dozens of places to connect, like with Zoom, which thank God for Zoom for the last couple of years. It saved us all. And they can start saying, and let me show you here, let me put it on my screen. These are our numbers. This is 93% of that animal has been put to uses beyond anything that normally would have been imagined back then, and very little waste. And by the way, we are also helping the farmers figure out how to use manure and other things that go along with that process to grant for organic uses, and so I can see the minds working on all the ways that you take a particular animal and all the things that they could do. So they've got a community, and now they've also, once they reach B Corp status, they will have the B Corp community to work in too. So I'm rounding this out with an interest in how you think this movement is going to help out with what's called the Great Resignation generation, who are saying, we learned through pandemic that we want to be, the whole person doing something. Do you think there's a nice connection between B Corps attracting some of those people and helping out reallocate some of those talents?
Absolutely. I think that this is, as the whole concept, the movement grows, for a long time, just talking with young people, and I've dabbled in a little bit of teaching myself. It was like this, it was an either or. It was either I'm going to do work and I'm going to make a good living, or I'm going to go and not make any money and, the traditional, work for a nonprofit, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now there is this way that we get to, and not that there's anything wrong with working with nonprofits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, but now there is this middle path, as I say, of being able to really know that the organization that you're working for or with is walking the walk, right? Of what they say, the values that people are looking for meaning in their lives. I mean, that's what folks just working for the next dollar. There's not a lot of meaning in that, right? And just, making the next deal or, driving the next quarter penny off, whatever. That's not meaningful for people. But what is meaningful for people is helping to solve some of the greatest challenges that we have, right? As a society, socially, and as well as environmentally.
So wouldn't you want to design your practice life around that, folks? Around that way? Because when Peter and I delved very deeply into the meaning of practice for the individual, meaning was meaning. In other words, you don't choose to elevate your efforts to a practice level if you are basically unsure of why. So once you can make that alignment with an entity, an organization, even a game, I guess, that really makes that meaningfulness come alive, the learning becomes the foremost experience. And you just can't learn enough because you're constantly overcoming challenges, as your husband did when you started your business, and you've solved the problem. Now you've got a community of people to help with the learning. In a way of closing out this conversation, can you imagine learning as well and as much as you have if you hadn't taken on this journey?
I don't know any other way that we learn, Dave, than by doing. And so I love that this is a conversation about practice. Because, and no, of course, and I would not have learned, it's a cliche to say, but I would not have learned if I hadn't made the mistakes that I've made, and I would not have learned if I had not had other people beside me who were learning similar lessons. So again, thank you for your leadership in this area.
Well, thank you for yours too, Maria. I will hopefully will stay in connection. I believe I'm going to have a conversation with Mel Hubner.
Excellent.
Who is your colleague. And I was so fascinated with how she reached out to me that I said, well, let's do a podcast with you.
I love that. I can't wait. I cannot wait to hear that. The big part of my work, Dave, is like, it's not just, we think of leadership as the people who are, quote unquote in charge. No, leadership is about all of how everybody in the organization, across the organization, is being together. And so I can't wait to hear her perspective and what she says.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know when it's done. She will, for sure. Yeah. But thank you so much, Marie Kingery. Wonderful, wonderful person, and keep up that great work.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon.